Welcome back to another episode of the Chicagolandians, a casual sports podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Cunningham, joined as always by my co-host, Connor Cunningham.
We're two brothers from the Chicagoland area who love exploring every corner of the sports world. Each week, we break down sports stories, ideas, and theories in a way that's simple and fun.
Whether you're a lifelong fan or just curious about the game, there's something here for everyone.
Welcome back to another episode of the Chicagolandians podcast. I am your host, Connor Cunningham, joined as always by my co-host, Patrick Cunningham.
Hello, everybody.
On today's episode, we're going to be doing a little bit of a Super Bowl preview. Kansas City Chiefs versus the Philadelphia Eagles. We're going to do our takes, give some storylines, and overall just do a little primer for the Super Bowl. Pat, how's that sound for you?
Sounds great. Super Bowl week, one of the better weeks of the year. Super Bowl Sunday, one of the better Sundays of the year, if not the best Sunday of the year. Very excited to talk about it.
I'd be honest, I don't know if it's one of the better Sundays because you don't get the Monday off. I think that's the issue with it. Like, think about the Sunday before MLK Day. I mean, that's a great Sunday because you get
Sunday.
MLK Day off, right?
That's true.
If they could somehow flip-flop it around, I think that would be a really good Sunday. You know, they are thinking if they expand to an 18-game season, I think Super Bowl Sunday would actually fall on a 3-day weekend, which I think is worth considering.
Wow,
I think
that'd be
that's
awesome.
something that Goodell should at least consider. But anyways, enough Sunday talk. We're going to start off with some basic news in the Chicagoland area. To start off with Chicago Bears, we have made a couple more hirings for the Ben Johnson Legacy All-Star, whatever you want to call it, coaching staff. Recently, we hired former Kansas City Chiefs offensive coordinator Eric Bieniemy to be our running backs coach. So Eric Bieniemy, I believe, served for 4 seasons as the Chiefs offensive coordinator. He started off as their running backs coach before being promoted to the offensive coordinator and served until 2022, I believe, before leaving to pursue a offensive coordinator position with the Commanders, and then ultimately leading him to the UCLA Bruins as an offensive coordinator, and then out of the league from college football, and ultimately back into the hands of the Chicago Bears. So Bieniemy has kind of had a storied journey the last couple of years, but he is a talented coach with coaching experience. He's won 2 Super Bowls. The biggest knock against Bieniemy was the fact that he was a part of the Kansas City Chiefs where he was not the primary play caller. Andy Reid was the play caller. This is the same thing that you see with Matt Nagy right now. So that was why he left for Washington, but I still think the hire is exciting. If anything, you're bringing more experience into the building for a first-year head coach with other young people on this staff. So I think overall, can't be too mad about it. I think it's exciting. He was also the running backs coach for the Vikings previously, where Adrian Peterson was. He was overlapping with those seasons, which I think is interesting as well. His time with the Chiefs also overlapped with Ryan Poles, and his time with the Vikings overlapped with Kevin Warren as well, so I wonder if these guys are familiar with each other. But Eric Bieniemy added to the staff. Pat, you got any opinions on that?
I'm just excited to see the Bears right the wrong that is hiring Chiefs offensive coordinators. But explain it to me like I'm 5, Connor. The 4-year stint with the Chiefs, when the Chiefs were winning Super Bowls, I don't understand how Eric could have such a downfall after his Chiefs career. It really seems like everything kind of fell apart as soon as he left the Chiefs. Does that speak to his lack of ability as an offensive coordinator if he wasn't able to have success anywhere else? Can you speak to that?
Well, okay, so first off, I want to make a correction. So he served as the offensive coordinator for the Chiefs from 2018 until 2022, so he was there for 5 years. And then he spent 5 seasons before that as their running backs coach. So he was with the Chiefs for 10 years. I think he was not receiving a lot of head coaching interest because he never showed his ability as a play caller. So that was unfortunate that he needed to go to a spot who needed a play caller. So he had to go to the Commanders. And then the Commanders were obviously in a bad situation with Ron Rivera as the head coach, Sam Howell as the quarterback. Not a lot of great pieces. You know, he wasn't specifically fired, but Ron Rivera was fired and the staff was not retained. So I think that was a difficult situation for him to be in. And with UCLA, it was labeled as a mutual parting because the plan was always for Bieniemy to return to the NFL. That makes less sense to me. That seems more of a spin job there. But I still think that he's a good coach. I just don't think he's ever shown success as a play caller. But that's all right. I think Maybe he's just more of a coordinator, kind of set the pieces up, let somebody else knock him down kind of guy.
All right. Well, Eric, I'm excited to see what he does.
Eric, ever interested? Always welcome on the pod, man. Next piece of news, Ryan Poles has received, or rumored to receive, a contract extension to align with the Ben Johnson stint. We were speculating if Ryan Poles was going to be extended with the Ben Johnson hiring because that's something that Ben Johnson was looking for. So it looks like now we've received that, for better or for worse. We're going to have possibly 5 more years of Ryan Poles, or at least throughout the duration of Ben Johnson. I'll say my opinion. I think I'm okay with it. I think that this offseason, there's a lot of holes to fill. A lot of holes on the offensive line that he has to fill that he hasn't filled in the 3 years that he's been here. But I do think he doesn't get enough credit for potentially solving the quarterback issue in Chicago, which is a huge problem that we've had since the inception of the franchise. He's added talent to this team, and he was able to acquire Ben Johnson as the head coach. So I think he does have positives. Of course, he has negatives, and that's why we're surprised that he was extended. But I still think that recently he has not gotten a lot of credit as the GM for the Chicago Bears.
Now, is it naive of me to say with contract extensions, it's kind of like, who cares, right? It's different for players, right? Or like the presidency, where it's very hard to be removed before your term is over or before your contract's up. But like, we fired Eberflus when he was still under contract. We can definitely still fire Poles even though he's under contract, right? If Poles bombs next year, he could be gone. I don't know what the reaction has been on Twitter to this news. I'm sure it's a mixed bag, but I won't totally lose my head over this, because if it does go bad, we're just going to fire him again, right?
No, I mean, that's fair. I mean, I believe, if you fire him before the contract ends, you have to pay him the money that's still on the contract.
Well, yeah.
Right? That's how contracts work. So I guess you wouldn't be super excited about now the idea of having to pay another head coach, essentially playing 2 head coaches at once, or 2 general managers at once. But yeah, you can always just cut bait with somebody. It's not like you're entitled to keep him around, right? People say if he bombs this year, and I feel like it's different than like Justin Fields bombing for a year or Ben Johnson bombing for a year. When you think of a general manager bombing for a year, what does that even mean? He cuts everybody or he trades everybody away, and just that's a very scary thought of him bombing for a year. So I hope he can just figure it out and we can just have a good offensive and defensive line. I don't know, maybe we can win a Super Bowl, but I think it'll be fine. I'm not going to overreact about a Ryan Poles extension. I think maybe he doesn't deserve it, but I don't know if he deserves to be fired. Moving on, we have Illinois basketball, Illini basketball. A couple new updates. On January 30th, the Illini lost to the Nebraska Cornhuskers at Nebraska. And 2 days ago on Sunday, the Fighting Illini defeated the Ohio State Buckeyes 87-79 at home. Now the Illini sit at 23 in the country. It's really in the middle of the season that I feel like this always happens, where you just start playing games way too close. You feel like you can't get up for big games. You can't get up for small games. Just the team's not really gelling right now. So I feel like this is just a gritty part of the season that we kind of got to get through, and we'll see once the Big Ten tournament, kind of the makeup of this team, but definitely some frustrating times right now.
It's funny once you start to rack up. I think the Nebraska is our 7th or maybe 8th loss of the season. It's funny the weight each loss carries. Yeah, by the end you're like, oh, we lost to Nebraska. Obviously sucks.
Whatever.
But like our first couple losses, you were so heartbroken. You thought the whole season was over because you had these grand visions of a perfect season and just winning everything. But now it's like, we'll get them next week.
Yeah, it's like March Madness, where you're like, okay, through the first day, I didn't get any games wrong. And you're like, okay, well, I got one of my 8-9 games wrong. Okay, that's fine. And by the second weekend, you're like, okay, at least I have my championship team left still. So that's like pretty good. So I think Brad will get the team back on the right track. We're still a tournament team. I still think we can make some noise. We just got to get hot at the right time. Basketball's a game of runs. I think NCAA basketball's a game of runs too. Moving on to Illinois football, we have 1 point to talk about. The Illini have signed cornerback Victor Singleton. This is a big signing for the football team. He's a 4-star player, but specifically, he's a number 3 cornerback in the nation, the number 46 player overall in the nation. So a top 50 player to come sign for the Illini. I think he's crazy. Interesting to see what the NIL deal is that he got. I'm sure he got a big bag of money, but really exciting to see a elite player come to the program, and I hope it starts to show a shift in what Illini football can be coming off that South Carolina win. I feel like things are trending in the right direction. This team's shaping up to be dangerous.
Yeah, 100%. With the emergence of NIL, I'm just still confused why teams like Ohio State and Michigan can have so much more money than a equally huge program like U of I. Like, surely we have to have just as many big donors. Obviously, we don't have like Dave Portnoy and Tom Brady, right? But like, we surely have to have huge donors that can give us a ton of money to pay our players. So I think we're kind of in this feeling out stage where the NIL is still kind of being settled. But this is a great signing. This seems like maybe a changing of the times. Maybe now we are able to compete at a higher level or make comparable offers to the other big programs. But man, having a sweet corner, there's nothing. Maybe a receiver is cooler to have, but I think corner is just about the best thing you can have on the team.
Yeah, he was committed. He wasn't committed, but he's an Ohio guy. So per 24/7, his crystal ball prediction was Ohio State. So I mean, such a quality player like that out of state is really impressive too. He's listed at 6 feet, 160, so kind of a Pat and Connor build, but I think we can put some more muscle on him and really turn him into a great player. But yeah, Vic, excited to have you here, man. Let's have a season. All right, moving on to the farts of the week. We have to talk about the Chicago Bulls. As much as it pains us, there was some news that happened. The Bulls have finally traded Zach LaVine. This was a 3-team deal between the Spurs, the Kings, and the Bulls. So the Spurs acquired De'Aaron Fox and Jordan McLaughlin. The Kings received Zach LaVine, Sidi Kissoko, 3 first-round picks, and 3 second-round picks. 2 great hauls for both those teams. De'Aaron Fox, fringe all-star player. Zach LaVine, playing at an all-star caliber level right now. Let's see what the Bulls got. We got Zach Collins, Trey Jones, Kevin Hoyter, their own 2025 pick via San Antonio. Essentially a bag of chips for Zach LaVine. So this seems like a salary dump for Zach LaVine's contract. It seems like at the very least the Bulls are trying to pick a direction right now by trading away Zach LaVine. You know, they still need to get rid of Vooch if they really want to be tanking. But I think the biggest complaint is that this should have been done at the beginning of the season. I think the only argument could have been that this is just the point where Zach LaVine's trade value finally reached a peak where he started to play pretty well for the Bulls, and maybe just there was no value in trading him earlier in the season. But I think we're currently sitting at 9th in the lottery, so I still think it's possible that we could lose enough games where you could get into top 5 contention. And essentially, if you get into the top 5 for the lottery, I mean, you could shift some things around. You can end up getting the first pick. So maybe we could start talking about Cooper Flagg, but I don't know. Just frustrating to get such little return for a player, especially a player that you have seen play for Chicago for so long in Zach LaVine. Pat, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, 100%. It's sad to see Zach LaVine, his whole career with the Bulls, to have so much on the court success in an individual level, but to never have real playoff success. LaVine was on the Bulls for 8 years and is top 10 in most all-time Bulls stats. He's number 1 in 3 points and 3-point attempts. He's, I think, top 5 in points scored or field goal attempts. His impact on the Bulls is tremendous, and it's sad to see trading a player like this. It doesn't really feel like we lost a huge piece of the team. It doesn't feel like when we got rid of Derrick Rose, right? Because we've just never had real success with Zach LaVine. But, you know, I love the guy. He completely transformed his career in Chicago. Before coming to the Bulls, he was never seen as this prolific scorer. And just sad that we didn't get anything for him.
Day late, dollar short, and now DeBalzac has reduced to just ball, singular ball. So not a great place to be at. Zach Collins, I remember, quality player from Gonzaga. Kevin Hoyter, when my friend told me this, I thought he said Kevin Porter. So that's what I know about Kevin Hoyter and Trey Jones. So you know what? Jury's out on what will happen here. I know we were pretty excited when you traded away Lauri Markkanen, and then Lauri Markkanen turned into a great player. So maybe all 3 of these guys will turn into all-stars for the Chicago Bulls. But another piece of news that we wanted to at least talk about is the Luka Doncic trade. So this came across our desk late into the night. I believe this hit at like 10 p.m. the Dallas Mavericks traded all-star, probably top 5 player in the NBA, Luka Doncic, to the Los Angeles Lakers and LeBron James for Anthony Davis, Max Christie, and a first for Luka. Quite a big trade, especially for a elite player in the NBA and a injury-prone player in Anthony Davis. Was a really crazy trade to see such little return for a player like that. You just never see franchise players moved like that. I mean, he was the face of the franchise. Mark Cuban said that if he had to pick between his wife and Luka, he would pick Luka. You figured that this guy was going to stay there forever, and now for him to be probably the face of the franchise when LeBron leaves or retires, to have LeBron and Luka teaming up, it's pretty crazy. I know we're a Chicago sports podcast, but at least wanted to mention it.
Yeah, and the public reception of this trade has been insane. Following this trade, Twitter was just filled with people's reaction to the Luka trade. Public opinion is the Mavs absolutely just blew this trade, and teaming up LeBron and Luka on the same team. And the Lakers right now are fifth in their what'd you say? And Bronny, yeah. The Lakers right now are fifth in their conference. So, I mean, they're a legitimate playoff team right now with Luka. Be very excited to see what happens with them. I think from the Mavs perspective, a player like Luka is essentially like moving LeBron. Those players are typically untouchable.
It would be like if Josh Allen or Lamar or Mahomes just got traded.
Yeah, like insane.
That never happens. Yeah,
insane. Luka, in an interview today, said he kind of always felt this was coming. I think we could do a little more research into like the management and ownership of the Mavericks. Seems like him and Luka disagreed about a lot of stuff, and there was some trouble brewing there that caused this trade. But apparently Jason Kidd didn't even know this trade was coming until it was finalized, which is like...
I know, I saw that. That's crazy.
And watching the owner or the GM sitting next to Jason Kidd justifying this trade... It was so delusional. It was crazy. He was like, I've worked with Kidd for so long that I just know the type of players he likes, and I know the type of players that he can work well with. So I felt confident to make this trade, and Jason Kidd just looks so dead in the face where it's like, I'm sure Jason Kidd loves to play with the best player in the league, players, and he can work with that player pretty well. Just doesn't make sense to me. Also, Luka is 25 years old, and Anthony Davis is 31. So, I don't know. Luka is like the best scorer in the league in the prime of his career. Anthony Davis is on the way out. Doesn't make sense to me.
Luka also said that he was asked about rumors that he wouldn't take a Supermax extension from the Mavs. A reporter asked him, there's rumors from your camp or your team that you wouldn't be interested in that deal. Is that at all true? And he just shook his head and he said, I have no idea where that came from. Really seems interesting, the fall of Luka from Dallas. So I'm sure this will be a very interesting storyline to follow for the rest of the year, but certainly an interesting trade from the Dallas Mavericks.
Now, people say Luka is 270 pounds. Do you believe that? He's also, I mean,
he didn't look bad in the
tall.
interview. He didn't look bad in the interview. I feel like his face looked pretty normal.
He looked nice. He had a little sweater on. He looked like he was wearing like what I would wear. It was funny to see it.
Yeah.
But
he looked nice.
Yeah.
I don't think he's 270 right now. No.
I'm not going to tell Luka to lose weight. Seems like it's working well for him, but
no. I feel like he probably knows best. But okay, moving on. Enough basketball talk. We're moving on to the favorite segment of the week. We have the review of the week. So again, a lot of submissions. We had to pick through a couple of these, kind of did a coin flip. But this review comes in from Big Cat Williams. Ever heard of him? Title reads, the best Chicago sports podcast, by far, ! 5 stars. If you're a Chicago sports fan and you're not listening to the Chicagolandians, what are you even doing? It's a perfect combination of informative and funny. Pat and Connor have both the whiz-bang chemistry to keep the show light and snappy, as well as the dedication to research to leave you with more knowledge than you had an hour or so earlier. Also, their stable of guests are charming, witty, and very handsome. Keep up the great work, fellas. So that's another great review, this time from Big Cat Williams, a former Bears player as well. So really excited to see the reach that this podcast have. If you guys are interested in being featured on this part of the podcast, feel free to leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, wherever you consume podcasts. If you can, limit it to 5 stars or maybe 4.9 at the very least, but always open for more reviews, guys.
Connor, if you were to guess, how tall do you think Big Cat Williams is?
Well, he's not small Cat Williams, so I'd say he has to be at least 6'4".
Big Cat Williams is 6'7". He is 6'7", 330 pounds. Looking up photos of this guy, he is humongous. My God. You could use his jersey as a blanket. That guy's a house.
Do you know what's big too, Pat? Let me put you onto something. Something that's big, saltwater crocodiles. When's the last time you've seen a saltwater crocodile?
It's been a while.
Let me tell you, you should look up these things. Dinosaurs. Very large. I was running on the treadmill yesterday, listening to a podcast about saltwater crocodiles. I was freaking out a lot, but those are some big monsters. But Big Cat Williams, also a big monster as well. So Big Cat, thank you for the review. Again, all fans out there encouraged to please leave a review, and you might be featured on this part of the podcast. Pat, do you have anything else to add?
No, just to say that my bowling game is kind of starting to get unlocked.
Yes.
That's the only thing that I wanted to mention. I've started to use 2 fingers, no thumb in my bowling class, and today I bowled about 7 first throw gutter balls in a row, but then the last couple of frames I had, I was really starting to get some hook on the ball, covering a lot of board. So it's starting to become more fun. If anyone wants to play, please reach out.
Is that 2 fingers, so 1 each hand, or 2 on 1 hand?
Yeah, I kind of use like my pinkies on both hands and then just throw it overhand. And it gets a lot of hook, actually.
Yeah, a lot of movement there. Yeah, so I think I bowled an 80 today, so, about 220 away from the perfect goal that we're looking at. But I think by the end of this podcast, I will, at the end of this show, I'll be turned into a 300 bowler.
End of the show is in the end of this episode?
No, I think like the end of when we're done with this show in like 30 years, when we decide to lay this show to rest. All right, but enough bowling talk. Let's move on to meat and potato talk, and that is the Super Bowl preview. So, if you're living under a rock, the Kansas City Chiefs are going to be playing the Philadelphia Eagles in New Orleans this Sunday. So the Chiefs have opened up as 1.5-point favorites. There's a 49-point over-under. If you guys are interested in betting the money line, we got Chiefs at -127, Eagles at +107. Now, I will never advise on sports betting, but I think those are some interesting lines that you might want to dance a little bit on.
That is a close game. That is real tight.
Razor tight. Very tight. We're going to go over some storylines here, but Pat, just quick thoughts. What were your opinions when you saw Chiefs-Bills, Eagles-Commanders games, when you kind of started to realize that what the Super Bowl matchup is going to be? This is a matchup that we've seen as recent as 2 years ago. We saw this matchup. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, so I'll say the Chiefs-Bills game was kind of what I expected. We'll get into it later, but I don't know if you know this. The Chiefs have actually won 17 consecutive one-score games. So,
feels like it.
Yeah. So I kind of knew it was going to be a close game, and I figured the Chiefs were going to pull away at the end. So no surprises there. I was disappointed the Bills didn't win. Just really speaks to how great of a quarterback Mahomes is and the coaching staff that they have there, what they are able to do with a seemingly lackluster offense. But the Eagles-Commanders game was more of a surprise to me, especially following that Lions game. I thought the Commanders were at least going to stay close to the Eagles, but they ended up getting absolutely blown out. The Commanders' opening drive took forever, and I think they settled for a field goal, and the Eagles scored the first play of their drive with Saquon Barkley. And pretty quickly, it seemed like magic had left the Commanders.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you get 55 hung on your head, that's just... You go back to the locker room and you think, man, that game did not go the way we wanted to. Saquon Barkley had 3 rushing touchdowns. I don't know. Did you see the interview from the opening ceremony of the Super Bowl where Saquon was asked by some jabroni interviewer how close he was to signing to Chicago?
No, I did not see that.
Somebody asked him this. I'm writing an article on it right now, and he said his quote was pretty damn close. So I feel like this always happens where we're just sitting at home just like hating life. And then some news article comes across the desk of like, oh, Tom Brady almost signed with the Bears before he went to the Bucks, or Saquon Barkley almost signed with the Chicago Bears. And you're just sitting there being like, why do we have to publish this? I'm just sitting here. But yeah, Eagles certainly look like a buzzsaw right now. The Chiefs look more like a very hot butter knife, maybe. Calculated and precise. They know how to win football games, but I was disappointed by the turnout. I was glad that the Eagles made the Super Bowl, but the Bills have been getting railed by the Chiefs for the past 4 or 5 years in the playoffs. It seems like Mahomes just has Josh Allen's number. But let's move on to some actual storylines. big first storyline that we have, I'm sure you guys are well aware of this storyline, but it's the Chiefs dynasty. Dynasties are a topic that are often discussed in the NFL because dynasties, they should be pretty rare in the NFL, right? Winning a Super Bowl is extremely difficult to do. Very few teams are able to do it. Very few players are able to do it. Aaron Rodgers, one of the best quarterbacks of all time, has one Super Bowl, right? Phillip Rivers, incredible quarterback, has 0 Super Bowls. Caleb Williams, one of the best quarterbacks in the league, has 0 Super Bowls. It is hard. The Chiefs seem to make it look very easy, almost as easy as the New England Patriots and Tom Brady. The Chiefs have made the Super Bowl 5 times in the last 6 years, including 3 times in a row. The one time that they didn't make the Super Bowl, they lost in the AFC Championship. These guys love playing in the Super Bowl, and they play in the Super Bowl a lot. They're competing for a three-peat, something that has never been done in NFL history. Chicago Bulls did it twice in NBA history, but that's, a bouncing ball sport, not a throwing ball sport. The Packers in the 1960s won 3 world championships in a row, but that isn't a real stat. Nobody cares about world championships. The Lakers had a three-peat in 2002 with Kobe and Shaq. That's the most recent three-peat in North American professional sports. But this topic of three-peat, it's very alluring. It was really cool to see the Chiefs win 2 in a row. And then the Super Bowl interviews come out and you think, well, shoot, maybe they're going to win 3 of these things. So I don't know. I honestly would not be excited about a three-peat. I get the argument of witness greatness, but I think when it's happening, I don't really care about greatness. It's not like, honestly, there's been very few times in my life where I've sat back and thought, man, I'm so thankful I was able to watch Tom Brady be such an elite player and win so many Super Bowls. How many times have you had that thought?
I've thought about that more. I appreciate being able to see Tom Brady win with the Bucs or the Patriots. I think that's a cool thing.
Yeah, maybe I just have a different opinion. I think it's very cool in the moment, but then, about a month later, I think, man, it sucks that Mahomes wins every time or Brady wins every time. I think I would be more excited about the dynasty that the Chicago Bears could be. But the Chiefs have won 17 consecutive one-score games, as you mentioned, Pat. That is an NFL record. Pat Mahomes has lost 3 games in the playoffs in his entire career. That's a Super Bowl and 2 AFC championships. The guy loves winning when it matters most. The Chiefs love winning when it matters most, and it sure looks like they're in prime position to three-peat for the first time in NFL history. Pat, what are your thoughts?
Well, something else I would just like to say is this is the 3rd Super Bowl for the Eagles in 7 years. So we've got this Chiefs dynasty, but we've also kind of have an Eagles dynasty coming up.
Well, at least the Eagles, when they won their Super Bowl, that was a completely different team that they had in 2018.
True.
Carson Wentz was their starting quarterback with Nick Foles filling in the Super Bowl. Alshon Jeffrey was their main player, right? Totally different team. This is Jalen Hurts' 2nd Super Bowl appearance in a pretty young career as well. I feel like Jalen Hurts, most disrespected quarterback in the NFL. But yeah, the Eagles are just, I feel like I could talk hours about how well run the Eagles are, but that is a franchise that teams should aspire to be, is the Philadelphia Eagles. Not the fans. I won't speak to the quality of the fans. I think they're passionate fans. I think they're mean fans, but the Eagles as an organization, very well run.
We'll talk about it later, a little bit about Chiefs fatigue, but I think in a year, if the Chiefs do win this year, I think I'll be able to appreciate the Chiefs winning for 3 years in a row, first time ever. But in the moment, it's no. When you are getting pitched a perfect game, do all the batters sit in awe and just let themselves strike out? It's no. They try to break the perfect game because that's embarrassing. Nobody in the league wants to be dominated by a single team that much. Obviously, you don't want to happen. But when it does happen, you can sit back and say, wow, that is really impressive. But in the moment, it's no, of course you don't want to have that happen. You don't want them to win just for the sake of the three-peat, right?
I agree. Yeah, I don't want to just lie down and say, oh, Pat Mahomes, please, please, please just win all these games so I can witness it. I feel like that's my opinion. Obviously, I respect it. Obviously, it's clear how impressive this run has been for the Kansas City Chiefs, how dominant they have been, how incredible Pat Mahomes has been. But also, at the same time, it's it makes the rest of the league look so bad. We're all just so bad that none of us can even compete against these guys. But anyways, let's move on. So first point that we have is Chiefs dynasty. Second is Saquon Barkley. We mentioned him a little bit, almost a Bear. Maybe if he had signed with the Bears, this would be DeAndre Swift that we're talking about instead of Saquon Barkley. Who knows? But last offseason, the New York Giants chose to let Saquon Barkley look elsewhere. They did not re-sign Saquon Barkley. This was a featured segment on the offseason edition of Hard Knocks. The Giants owner had a great clip where he was in the general manager's office and said, I would not be able to sleep very well at night if Saquon Barkley was a member of the Philadelphia Eagles. The GM kind of went, yeah. Moving on, and he eventually signed with the Philadelphia Eagles for a decent amount of money. But Saquon ended up having one of the best years that a running back has ever had in NFL history. He rushed for over 2,000 yards and 13 rushing touchdowns. I believe Jalen Hurts had something like 13 or 12 rushing touchdowns himself, all on the 1 yard line. So Saquon could have easily had 20 plus touchdowns to go along with his 2,000 rushing yards. He also, in the playoffs, has had 442 rushing yards and 5 rushing touchdowns, including a 3-touchdown game versus the Commanders. The guy has been playing at an unreal level, especially dealing with so many injuries with the Giants. He tore his ACL, I think, 56 snaps into the previous season. To see him come in and just absolutely dominate for a division rival has been pretty interesting. I think it's also kind of fun to see him and Derrick Henry and Josh Jacobs. There is this theme for so long about not paying your running backs and always just drafting running backs, very low value position. And while I still feel like that's the correct approach for team building, it's very interesting to watch the Baltimore Ravens and the Philadelphia Eagles have so much success with these older, very highly paid running backs. And it really does seem like maybe the running back position is a little more valuable, at least at the very top, is extremely valuable to a team. Pat, what have you thought of Saquon Barkley? I mean, he's been incredible this year. He had the backwards hurdle, the butt hurdle. That was... He's so dynamic. He's so fun to watch. Every time he gets the ball, you think he could break off a 70-yard run. Saquon turning into one of my favorite players in the NFL.
Yeah, 100%. I think back to when the 49ers traded for Christian McCaffrey, and even at that time, the 49ers were not as good of a team as the Eagles were before they had Saquon Barkley. So, like, to your point, Connor, about Derrick Henry and Josh Jacobs, it is really interesting to see in recent years how much a dynamic running back can completely transform your offense, especially the Eagles, where the whole argument was, do they even need that great of a running back with Jalen Hurts and his rushing ability, and especially his ability to score on the goal line? I will also say Saquon Barkley, you touched on it too, Connor, one of the most likable people in the NFL, and somebody that has been absolutely tortured with injuries his entire career and tortured with having to play for the New York Giants.
The friggin'
Giants.
Giants.
Really, really great to see a player of his caliber finally have the success that he deserves.
I mean, it is pretty crazy. Saquon is arguably the most talented running back in the league, or one of the most talented running backs in the league. To just go to the best offensive line in the league, Lane Johnson is incredible. Jordan Mailata is another incredible player as well. It seemed like a foregone conclusion that this was just going to work out super well for the Eagles, and it totally has. So, yeah, Saquon has been on an absolute tear this season. Now, another piece of the Philadelphia Eagles pie is that good old quarterback, Jalen Hurts. So, as we said before, this is his second Super Bowl appearance, but Jalen Hurts, probably not for no reason, is a pretty controversial figure in the NFL. I feel like he is a very disrespected or maybe highly debated NFL player. So he has definitely regressed from his previous seasons, I think partly because of the quality that they've been able to get from the running game, right? In previous seasons, when you're running with DeAndre Swift, Jalen Hurts had to play at a higher level. Now, I'll say the Eagles still made DeAndre Swift look like a phenomenal running back, worth $8 million a year. But this season, Jalen Hurts has played worse than in previous seasons. In 2022, he actually finished second in MVP voting. That was the previous Super Bowl season for the Eagles. He had 3,700 passing yards, 22 passing touchdowns, 760 rushing yards, and 13 rushing touchdowns. An incredible season. This year, he was under 3,000 passing yards and under 20 passing touchdowns. Very mediocre passing stats. He still had 630 rushing yards and 14 rushing touchdowns. But as a passer, Jalen Hurts did seem to regress this year. A lot of squeaky wheel with A.J. Brown, clearly showing frustration on the field and off in post-game interviews. Seems like the passing game of Jalen Hurts has regressed, and it seems like maybe this is going to be a storyline heading into the offseason, but I think Jalen Hurts is a really good quarterback, proven winner in both the college and NFL level. I think he's an extremely hard worker. I do think he does have his limitations as a passer, but I still think he is for sure a top 5 quarterback in the NFL.
Yeah, from our old episodes, we talked about how important it is for a Super Bowl winning team to have that alpha quarterback. And it'd be interesting to see the Eagles be able to get over the hump and beat the Chiefs without a prolific passer in Jalen Hurts. But yeah, like you said, Connor, I like Jalen Hurts. I think he's a fantastic leader, super hard worker. I think the dude can squat about 600 pounds and also always disrespected. It takes Jalen Hurts to lose about 2 or 3 games before all of Twitter is completely turned against him.
I mean, it's partly because it's Eagles fans. Like, they wanted Sirianni gone last season after literally coming off a Super Bowl season. They probably want Jalen Hurts cut after he throws an interception, man.
Yeah, so for all of the millions and millions of reasons I don't want to see the Chiefs win, another one would also be to see Jalen Hurts kind of get his due praise.
All right, next point that we have is referee controversy. So there's been drama the entire season, and honestly probably for the past 3 years, that there is an underground government psyop or motive agenda to make the Chiefs be the face of the NFL. Many people believe that the Chiefs are intentionally getting close calls, especially some controversial calls in the 4th down in the Chiefs-Bills game with a Josh Allen goal line play as well. Now, I will say I don't think that there's anything fishy going on with the refs. I think it's football. There's a lot of close calls. For some reason or another, there's still no automatic ball tracking in the NFL. But, I mean, it's just the way football is. There's a lot of close calls that don't go people's way. I think it's just the fact that the Chiefs are often in close situations that these calls become apparent. It's rare that the Bears are in these situations where we feel like we're getting screwed by close calls because we're not often in close games. I just think the Chiefs are playing in a lot of very important close games. So the refs end up being very important. I don't think there's a serious... there's nothing going on right now, right? But I still think that there have been some bad calls, and I think it's lame that the one time that the Chiefs get a call that doesn't go their way, like last year in the regular season with that Kadarius Toney play, they bitch and moan about it like no one's business. But it definitely is a theme that the refs do seem to kiss a little Chiefs' ass.
Yeah, I think it's also a product of the fact that the Chiefs are right now the most popular team in the NFL. Just that there's more eyes on their game and maybe more eyes from casual fans who maybe don't understand the intricacies of refereeing or how just the nature of the sport is prone to errors, especially with ball spotting. But yeah, I don't think that there's anything fishy going on. I mean, could not imagine how much trouble all of those refs would get in.
The league would collapse.
Yeah, what that would do to... no one would watch the NFL. No one would watch the NFL anymore if anything came out like that. The risk reward for doing something like this is absolutely insane. Yeah, I think like you said, Connor, if everyone was watching the Bears play 24/7 and the Bears were playing in all the big games, I'm sure people would complain about close calls that you do or you don't get, right? And I think to use that as your main reason for why you don't like the Chiefs, I think is pretty lame. That takes away the spirit of football and competitiveness to just throw up your hands and say, how are we supposed to win? The refs were against us. That is so, that is like so lame and so defeatist.
Yeah, every coach says, don't let the refs decide the game. Don't blame the game on the refs. Little league coaches tell you that, right? Now, I won't sit and say that doesn't feel like sometimes there's something fishy going on, but the Commanders weren't complaining about the refs when they got 55 hung on them, right? So you sound like a meatball, but if you don't want it to come down to the refs, don't let it come down to the refs, right? But moving on, this is the biggest headline that I think is worth talking about. It's the idea of Chiefs fatigue. This is similar to Patriots fatigue, where it seems like every year, no matter how good or how bad the Chiefs roster seems to be, they still make it to the playoffs, and they still make it to the Super Bowl. This is the same thing with Brady. No matter how many short white guys they have receiving the ball, they're still going to play in the big game. I have serious Chiefs fatigue. It was really fun seeing them come up the first time, beating the 49ers, seeing the young, cool, high-flying offense that was the Kansas City Chiefs, with Mahomes throwing for 50 touchdowns, 5,000 yards. It was really exciting to see a new face of the NFL kind of taking the crown from Tom Brady. But, I mean, you either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become a villain. And I think that's what we have right now with the Kansas City Chiefs. One reason that I dislike the Chiefs is that it seems like everything surrounding football is there to jam Chiefs down your throat. You're watching the Chiefs game. You're watching the Bills Chiefs play football. You go to ad breaks and you see Chiefs commercials. In the game, in between timeouts, you see Taylor Swift because Taylor Swift is dating Travis Kelce. So literally the biggest person in all of the world, Taylor Swift, is dating a big player on the Chiefs. It seems like anywhere you go, it's all Chiefs. They're making Hallmark movies about the freaking Chiefs. And it seems like no matter where you go, it's the Chiefs. There's too much Chiefs in my life right now. It seems like there's one team in the NFL. It seems like there's just the Globetrotters, and we're all just the freaking Generals playing against the Globetrotters.
I mean, it probably doesn't help that a lot of the social media that I'm consuming and then the TV that I'm watching is football centric. So obviously the commercials are going to feature football players that you know. But still, excluding that, T-Mobile ads, you got Pat Mahomes. State Farm, you got Andy Reid, Pat Mahomes, Travis Kelce. Lowe's, you got Travis Kelce. Jason Kelce's on ESPN announcing games. The Kelce brothers have a huge podcast. They're on Cinnamon Toast Crunch. They're in Campbell's Chunky Soup. They're everywhere. It's just, it feels suffocating. Everywhere you go, you're seeing the Chiefs.
Now, I see in the show notes we list the Bundle Rooski, which is a State Farm commercial. Now, I'm going to come out on a limb there and say I don't hate the Bundle Rooski commercial. I think Andy Reid is a gem, and I really like most of the commercials that he is in, especially the fast food one where he's eating the hamburger and he says, explain it again, but this time with those nuggies. And it's a great commercial, and I think Andy Reid's a gem. It just feels like, to your point, Pat, it just feels like every ad that I'm seeing is like, oh, here are the Kelces, here are Mahomes, here you dumb people. These are the only guys that you should care about. Yeah, I think it's part of that. It was just like you feel like you're being marketed to, like, I don't know, kind of like an idiot. Another frustrating point about the Chiefs is that they're just not very fun to watch anymore. The start of the Chiefs dynasty, they were an extremely high-flying offense with a pretty poor defense. This has kind of been the opposite in recent years where their offense has been very low-flying and their defense has been playing at an elite level. So in 2020, this was their first Super Bowl win. They were first in total yards and first in total passing. They were sixth in points scored. Mahomes threw for 4,700 passing yards, 38 touchdowns, and only 6 interceptions. Travis Kelce, who was their leading receiver, had 1,400 receiving yards. Tyreek Hill had almost 1,300, and the two of them combined for 26 receiving touchdowns. That is a phenomenal offensive season, but that's not even their best offensive season that they had. In 2022, their second Super Bowl win, they were first in total yards, first in points scored, and first in passing yards. Mahomes threw for 5,241 touchdowns, and Kelce had 1,300 receiving yards and 12 touchdowns. That was a buzzsaw of an offense. You saw dynamic deep shots coming from Pat Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs all the time. It was the point where you were saying, wow, the Chiefs are getting so many fast guys in the draft. That's so fun because you're sending them on shot plays every drive. Now it's like the Chiefs are getting so many fast players so that they can run tricky end-arounds every play or like little shovel passes. It seems like the Chiefs just have the most boring offense, but those 2 seasons, it was generally really fun to watch the Chiefs play because they would score 50 points a game like it was nothing. And I think part of it was because they had a much poorer defense. This year, their offense is 16th in total yards, 14th in total passing yards, and 15th in points scored. Mahomes threw for under 4,000 passing yards this season and 26 passing touchdowns. That would be a great Bears season, but that's like mediocre quarterback stats. Travis Kelce was literally their leading receiver with 800 receiving yards and 3 touchdowns. The Chiefs' offense is not what it used to be, but primarily because their defense is stellar. Steve Spagnuolo is an incredible defensive coordinator. They have a lot of talent there. Nick Bolton, they have some incredible cornerbacks as well. They lost some guys too, though. They don't even have L'Jarius Sneed anymore. Chris Jones is playing at an elite level. Karlaftis is a great player as well. They have Trent McDuffie is an incredible cornerback as well. They have talent there. They're just boring to watch. It's a boring brand of football.
Yeah, absolutely. We've said it a lot this episode, but it's the same deal with the Patriots. Like, the Patriots didn't have... What was a fun season was when Tom Brady was with Randy Moss and they went undefeated, and Randy Moss had an insane season because it's fun to watch the best player throw to the best receiver. It was really fun to watch prime Travis Kelce and prime Tyreek Hill play with Pat Mahomes. But now it's like you're watching Pat Mahomes throw to like Xavier Worthy, an old Travis Kelce, and a really, really old DeAndre Hopkins. It's not an explosive offense. And having a lackluster offense leads to every single Chiefs game feeling like the exact same thing, where they rarely blow teams out anymore. We said the stat about how many close games they have, and they can just rely on this defense and then pull away at the end because Mahomes is the best fourth quarter quarterback in the league right now. Like, the first 3 quarters don't even matter. They're going to keep it close the whole time and then pull away at the very end.
Yeah, I agree. I think it is shocking to see lower numbers from Mahomes, and it's boring to see. It's like when you are playing intramural sports and you play the team that's a lot older, so you think, okay, we can be fine. We're the young, hot team. We're more explosive. But they just know all the little rules. They know all the little things, and they can just win all the time. Every passing play for the Chiefs is Mahomes just getting really close to the line of scrimmage and then dunking it over some guy's head to Xavier Worthy. It's a poor brand of football, but winning is winning, and at the end of the day, that's what matters the most. So another topic to talk about, and I think this is going to be the last topic that we're going to talk about, is the GOAT debate. And if you don't know, GOAT stands for greatest of all time. Side note, GOAT has lost all of its allure in my mind. It is the most overused phrase in the world. I do not need to know about what the GOAT in phone coverage is or the GOAT in pizza toppings. I think we use it way too often. But this would be Patrick Mahomes' 4th Lombardi trophy. Only Tom Brady has more than that with 7. He would tie Terry Bradshaw and Joe Montana with 4 Super Bowls. So this would put Mahomes actually ahead of pace of Tom Brady on that road to 7 or more than 7 Super Bowls. This would be his 4th Super Bowl in 8 seasons. And if he kept up this pace, playing for 23 seasons like Tom Brady, he would win 11 Super Bowls, which is an hilarious stat. He would run out of fingers to put Super Bowl rings on. A crazy stat, Brady won 3 Super Bowls in the first 4 years as a starter, so his first 5 years of his career in 2001, 3, and 4. But he didn't win his 4th Super Bowl until 2014, so that was his 15th season in the NFL. So at least with Brady, there was a long period where he wasn't winning, but with Mahomes, he is right out of the gate winning a ton of Super Bowls. So I think that you couldn't call Mahomes the GOAT until he surpasses Brady, but I do think Mahomes is definitely probably the most talented quarterback. I think he's got the biggest arm. I think he's probably the most creative quarterback. I would say it's probably either him or Rodgers, and I feel like he has the Super Bowls to back it up. Or certainly think Brady is the better quarterback or the more great quarterback, but I don't know. I think if he gets the Super Bowls, I think you could say he's the greatest of all time.
Isn't that crazy? So it took Brady 10 years after his 3rd Super Bowl to win another one. That's pretty remarkable. To even imagine Mahomes playing for another 10 years is pretty crazy. But yeah, it's so funny that Tom Brady wins his 7th Super Bowl and everyone thinks that that is just such a untouchable record. And it is. It is truly. When you look at every other franchise, how many Super Bowls they've won, Brady has more Super Bowls than like numerous franchises combined, right? And it seems impossible for anybody to come close to it. And Mahomes is already on pace to surpass Brady's legacy with Super Bowls. It's pretty crazy. Pretty insane. Yeah, I think if he wins this one, it would be hard not to start comparing the two of them. Like, seriously.
Yeah, I agree. I think, I'll give him 5. Then I'd call him the GOAT. I don't think he needs 7, but man, it is crazy to have watched 2 quarterbacks in our lifetime now. There's been 2, as much as we say it's difficult for dynasties to form, most of my life I've just been watching dynasties play with the Patriots and the Chiefs. That's like what football has been for me. Since you mentioned it, I've been thinking a little bit. I think greatness is interesting to watch, but I think I would prefer greatness if it was at our benefit, not at the Kansas City Chiefs' benefit. But
True.
Pat, do you have any more points to make?
No, I have nothing else to mention. I guess just some smaller storylines real quick. We talked about 2018 Eagles. These 3 Super Bowls that they have been to has been under the leadership of Howie Roseman as the GM. So you want to talk about one of the best GMs in the league, Howie Roseman. He has really figured out how to run a freaking team.
That is a great GM. I feel like, honestly, he's the biggest just let it come to you. They always go best player available. I mean, even with Jalen Carter, and sure, they had the infrastructure to support a player like Jalen Carter, but Jalen Carter, literally the number 1 player in the draft, just falls to them at 10. They're able to trade back with the freaking Chicago Bears in order to get the best player in the draft, who was an all-pro player or a Pro Bowler this year. it just seems so easy for them. Their whole defense is pretty much made of Georgia football players. Even getting value this year with like Cooper DeJean, Jordan Davis is an incredible player, Nakobe Dean's an incredible player, Nolan Smith. They just have all these studs on defense and then an incredible offense built by the stud that they have in Lane Johnson. And they don't even have Jason Kelsey anymore. Just seems like they're always so loaded. And even Howie has a lot of, I don't mean to be glazing him right now, but he's just smart even with contracts as well. I think Saquon's contract, he had no touchdown incentives in his contract. So because the Eagles have such a tush push, he wouldn't be frustrated by, sure, maybe his pride would be hurt by Jalen Hurts getting all those rushing touchdowns, but his pay was not related to the tush push at all, which I feel like is just a great way of thinking about contracts. And I think that just outlines his competencies. So if we could trade him for Ryan Poles, I would be interested in that, but a well-run franchise in the Philadelphia Eagles. Well, I think that's going to do it for this episode of the Chicagolandians. If you joined the episode, please share it with a friend. I always say this, but if you enjoyed this podcast, I'm sure you could think of at least one other person who enjoyed this podcast. If you enjoyed it so much, we would love for you to leave a review on Apple Podcast, Google Play, or Spotify, wherever you might consume podcasts. I don't know if people still use Google Play, but you can also follow us on social media. We're putting out short-form content on Instagram, TikTok, X or Twitter, as well as YouTube, at Chicagolandians, everywhere. But if we don't have anything else to say, I will say bear down.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Chicagolandians. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or wherever you listen. And if you want more Chicagolandians content, you can find us everywhere at Chicagolandians.